to private power and wealth. Hence, in the Bretton Woods system, limits on capital mobility substituted for limits on democracy as a source of insulation from market pressures. With the dismantling of the system from the 1970s, substantive democracy is reduced, and it becomes necessary to divert and control the public in some fashion. To deceive and oppress the public. In the 2004 elections, Bush received the votes of just over 30% of the electorate, Kerry a bit less. Voting patterns resembled those of 2000, with virtually the same distribution of red and blue states, whatever significance that may have. A small change in voter preference would have put Kerry in the White House. Either way, the outcome tells us very little about the country and public concerns. Congressional voting patterns make that even clearer. In the Senate, only 1 of 26 incumbents lost. Democrat Tom Daschle of South Dakota, a state with a population of about 770,000. In the House, had it not been for gerrymandering by anti-democratic Texas Republicans led by Majority Leader Tom DeLay, only 8 seats would have changed hands, an all-time low, and Republicans would have lost seats overall. Outside of Texas, they lost 3. The limited competition for House seats reached the lowest level on record, and Bush had the lowest approval rating of any re-elected president for whom data are available. Not much of a mandate. The results, however, significantly understate the meaninglessness of the electoral results, as we see when we look beyond electoral statistics. As usual in recent years, the 2004 electoral campaigns were run by the public relations industry, which, in its regular vocation, sells toothpaste, lifestyle drugs, automobiles, and other commodities. Its guiding principle is deceit. The task of advertising is to undermine the free markets we are taught to admire, mythical entities in which informed consumers make rational choices. In such systems, businesses would simply provide information about their products. Cheap, easy, simple. But it is hardly a secret that they do nothing of the sort. On the contrary, business spends hundreds of billions of dollars a year projecting imagery to delude consumers. Uncontroversially, that is the goal of advertising, not providing information. The automobile industry does not simply make public the characteristics of next year's models. Rather, it devotes huge efforts to deception, featuring sex objects, cars climbing sheer cliffs to a heavenly future, and so on. Furthermore, as Veblen pointed out long ago, one of the primary tasks of business propaganda is the fabrication of consumers, a device that helps induce all the classic symptoms of state-based totalitarianism: atomization, political apathy, and irrationality, the hollowing and banalization of purportedly democratic political processes, mounting popular frustration, and so forth. The basic observation is as old as Adam Smith, who warned that the interests of merchants and manufacturers are to deceive or even to oppress the public, as they have done on many occasions. By now, they are served by major industries that have been created for this purpose. Informed consumer choice is about as realistic as the famed entrepreneurial initiative and free trade. Except for temporary advantage, the fanciful markets of doctrine and economic theory have never been welcomed or long tolerated by those who dominate society. Sometimes the commitment to deceit takes extreme forms. One illustration is the U.S.-Australia negotiations on a free trade agreement from 2003. These were held up by Washington's concern that Australia follows evidence-based procedures and prohibits direct-to-consumer marketing for prescription drugs, while U.S. manufacturers would prefer a system in which they have the freedom to market their products and set prices according to the market's willingness to pay. Australia engages in unacceptable market interference, U.S. government negotiators objected. Pharmaceutical corporations are deprived of their legitimate rights if they are required to produce evidence when they claim that their latest product is better than some cheaper alternative, or run TV ads in which some sports hero or movie actress tells the audience to ask your doctor whether this drug is right for you. It's right for me. Sometimes not even revealing what the drug is supposed to be for. The right of deceit must be guaranteed to the immensely powerful and pathological immortal persons that have been created by radical judicial activism. Australia's healthcare system is perhaps the most efficient in the world. In particular, drug prices are a fraction of those in the United States. The same drugs, produced by the same companies, earning substantial profits, though nothing like those in the United States, where such profits are commonly justified on the dubious grounds that they are needed for research and development, R&D. Economist Dean Baker finds that savings to consumers would be immense if public funding increased to 100% of R&D, thus eliminating the drug companies' justifications for monopoly pricing rights. The public already plays a much greater role than acknowledged, since the development of drugs relies on fundamental science, virtually all of which is funded by the public. Even with what is counted, corporate R&D concentrates more toward the marketing end. Major U.S. drug companies spend more than twice as much on marketing, advertising, and administration as on any kind of R&D, while reporting huge profits. One reason for the efficiency of the Australian system is that, like other countries, Australia relies on the practices that the Pentagon employs when it buys paperclips. The government uses its purchasing power to negotiate prices, actions barred by legislation for drugs in the United States. Another reason is Australia's reliance on evidence-based procedures. In order to charge the Australian government a high price for a new drug, the U.S. pharmaceutical corporations actually have to provide evidence that the new drug has demonstrable benefits, which is considered to be a barrier to trade by the U.S. The U.S. drug industry also objects to the Australian requirement that the companies must demonstrate significant clinical advantages and satisfactory cost-effectiveness in comparison with available drugs, as well as to Australia's overriding focus on cost-effectiveness generally. The industry denounces such measures as insidious, as they are, in interfering with the right of deceit that is central to really existing markets. When assigned the task of selling candidates, the PR industry naturally resorts to the same techniques as in marketing commodities. Deceit is employed to undermine democracy, just as it is a natural device to undermine markets. Voters appear to be aware of the travesty. On the eve of the 2000 elections, a large majority of the electorate dismissed them as an extravaganza run by rich contributors, party managers, and the PR industry, which trains candidates to project images and produce empty phrases that might win some votes. Pollsters found only one issue on which more than half of respondents could identify the stands of the candidates: gore on prescription drugs. More than 60% of regular voters felt that politics in America is generally pretty disgusting. The director of Harvard's Vanishing Voter Project reported that Americans' feeling of powerlessness has reached an alarming high, well beyond earlier levels. Very likely, these are among the reasons why the population at large seemed to have little interest in the stolen election that exercised educated sectors, and it may be why they paid little attention to charges about fraud in 2004. If one is flipping a coin to pick the king, it is of no great concern if the coin is biased. In 2000, issue awareness, knowledge of the stands of the candidates, reached an all-time low. It may have been even lower in 2004. In 2004, about 10% of voters, in an open question, chose the candidates' agendas, ideas, platforms, goals, as a prime reason for their votes. Bush